And so the US election has finally dawned today, an extraordinary ballot at the time of the virus that's already seen an unprecedented number of early votes being cast. Today, of course, the traditional way of casting the vote is underway. In several states, it's a close contest. Many people have been expressing fears about violence, and the final result is expected to be delayed because of the counting of postal voting. It really is an election like no other, and there are still legal cases trying to strike out various methods of voting. President Trump's latest tweets about postal ballot fraud have been labeled misleading on Twitter and Facebook, so it's still very exciting right to the bitter end, almost a day after Mr. Trump and Mr. Biden officially ended their campaign on the stomps, though not surprisingly, they're still using every last minute to try to convince the final voters.
If there's victory, I think we'll have victory. I think the polls are, suppression polls, and I think we'll have victory, but only when there's victory. I mean, there's no reason to play games. I look at it as being a very, a very solid chance at winning here. I don't know what the chances are. I don't know how they rate the chances, but I think we have a very solid chance of winning. And I think a lot of that has to do with the tremendous crowd size, but I think it's the ultimate poll. And it's been, honestly, it's been so much fun for me. There's so much love. I tell you, I think it's very sad. And part of the reason is it'll all be in Democrat cities, Democrat-run cities. It's going to be in Chicago, New York, and Portland, and Oakland, and, different places, Baltimore. And that's because of weak leadership.
Well, for his take on today's developments, I'm joined now from Florida by the Republican strategist Erol Morkoc. And Erol, good to talk with you. Not long now until the first polls close and the counting begins. And I mean, from the man, your man, seeking a second term, an unusual reflection saying that losing is never easy. And not for me, it's not. Those are his words. I mean, what do you make of what he said there? It sounds almost like he's accepting defeat.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that's a bit of a stretch. President Trump certainly opines upon many different subjects, and he would often say, Joe Biden, look at this candidate. If I lose to this guy, I mean, how can I look in the mirror? So, I mean, he's a guy who doesn't like to lose. He never, when they would ask him if would you concede the election, he always says, I'm going to win. Now, nobody likes to lose. President Trump doesn't like to lose, but that comment doesn't mean that he's conceding the election whatsoever.
I mean, the polls tip a Biden win. I'm sure you're aware of that, but you are in Florida. Could Florida again be the downfall of the Democrats? I mean, what's your objective reading as a political strategist, albeit a Republican one?
Because every momentum metric that we've needed in the last week has shown up. As of 2:30 p.m. today, we have 4,041,888 Republican votes, including all early mail-in and in-person, meaning we go into Election Day with 157,090 voter advantage in a state that Joe Biden was supposed to have an advantage in. We're looking at places like Miami-Dade County, which is a Democrat stronghold. 100,000 voters are coming out for Trump in there. And so, you saw actually last night that the campaign manager for Joe Biden, she actually, if you want to read between the lines, pulled the troops out of both Pennsylvania and Florida because they're seeing that it's an insurmountable lead. It's something that was supposed to be down to the wire is looking like Trump could win by a couple percentage points. And when you look at the ground game that Trump's and his surrogates have had here, as well as his campaign volunteers, field staffers, and the way that every Trump dollar for advertising goes much farther than any dollar for Joe Biden because Trump gets billions of dollars of free advertising down here in Florida. Remember, he's a Floridian. He changed his residency to be down here. So this is his home state, which will give him a bump as well. So we're actually seeing early numbers out of Florida tremendously in our favor. In fact, we're putting that in our back pocket as we look forward towards Arizona and North Carolina, which we also feel are ours. and then looking into the Keystone State, because once we take Pennsylvania, this landslide victory is going to be sealed and done for. So we're very keen for Florida voters to come out, especially today, and they're going to swamp the polls in favor of Trump. You see Trump signs everywhere. You don't see Biden signs anywhere. Latinos, hardworking Americans, immigrants like myself, everybody down here in Florida is pro-Trump, and we're going to see that come out.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you say that, Errol, because, of course, Florida is a divided state. I mean, you've got even the Latino vote that you're talking about is split between Cuban Americans who tend to vote Republican and Puerto Ricans and Mexicans who tend to vote Democrat. And I guess if Joe Biden does well in Florida or North Carolina or Georgia, then that could be an early indication that it should be a good night for him and a bad night for President Trump.
That would be an indicator of that, and I'd like to point out the reason why those million Cuban immigrants vote for Trump is because they've seen the horrors of socialism that have hit their country. You never see people in rafts made out of water bottles floating from capitalist countries to seek refuge in socialist or communist countries, whereas Puerto Rico has often been a financially dependent state and would vote for Democrats who give more money because that's how they get votes. And when it comes to the Mexican vote, specifically, you see that being more and more split. You saw the Telemundo averages after the first debate showing 66% Latino approval for President Trump. But once again, those Cuban voters are bedrock. We care about them. Unlike Obama, who made deals with Castro, this vile dictator who imprisoned free-loving, innocent business people, we stand with the Cuban people, and we're not going to abandon them. And they saw that with President Trump's first term. And the rest of the Hispanic community is very diverse. Venezuelans as well, I want to mention, are in there because Venezuelans have fled in droves from what used to be the richest country in South America to now reduced to eating cats and dogs. The average person lost 23 pounds. I mean, we don't want to have those people who've seen that. It's not these rich, yuppie college kids who read Marx for the first time and say, yeah, I like to share. When you go and actually put those things in practice and people have seen that, they come out and vote for us. So people with experience, I would say, the Hispanic community with experience and the ones who are hard workers and have seen the American dream as something that them and their children can benefit from will be coming out for us in droves. And we're seeing that as we are taking 150,000 vote lead going into Election Day today.
Well, let me move away slightly from that, because obviously we'll wait and see what the result is going to be. But we've heard that there is a profound sense of anxiety on both sides. I mean, do you agree with that assessment, especially given that it's strategists like you who will be held responsible if things go wrong for your party?
Oh, well, not us. I do believe that on the Democrat side, my counterparts are horrified, mortified, petrified, stupefied about the possibility of not being wrong once, but being wrong twice. And the reason they're wrong is because they are just cowards. They're simply cowards. They ran candidates who are not competitive. They could have ran Bernie Sanders. They could have ran Pete Buttigieg. They could have ran dynamic candidates. They could have ran Elizabeth Warren. Instead, they tried to do a mathematical equation where you hide your candidate in the basement. And when the crows come home to roost, those are the guys who are going to be out of a job come the day after the election. People like us who've put in the groundwork, who understand the situation, we're going to be fine because we're not worried at all. In fact, we're seeing more and more confidence coming into the last week. Like I said earlier on one of the programs, this is a horse race. When you get to the final turn, you start to see separation. And Donald Trump is far and away going to win the Triple Crown and take this as a landslide. So those other guys better be looking for new jobs. I'm not sure who's going to hire them. Maybe the Lincoln Project or other washed-up political conservatives who abandoned the Republican Party and now are on the outs of everything. Maybe they could find a home there.
Well, thank you, Erol. We really appreciate the time you've taken to talk with us. Erol Morkoc is a Republican strategist, and he was talking to me there from Florida. You're watching a special Arise News program on the U.S. election. Plenty more to come. Stay with us.